This year we're going to do the 1980s part 2. So I'll try to finish the 80s. I'll try to be a little more concise here. So we talked about the background to Iran-Contra. Okay. So, again, Iran's a terrorist state. There's terrorism in the 80s. The big issue that's for the Reagan administration is Hezbollah, Army of God in Arabic. Hezbollah is kidnapping journalists and even a CIA station chief in Lebanon. And so it's becoming an issue for the Reagan administration. And then again in Nicaragua, the CIA, the Democrats in Congress have cut off support for the Contras, making it illegal to do so. Both private individuals and government entities. So not even private individuals can help the Contras. And the Contras begin losing their war against the communists, the Soviet, or the communist Sandinistas, or left-wing Sandinistas. Some major players in this group. On the final, you'll have to talk about Iran-Contra. You can mention a couple names. They're all most of them are part of the NSC. What is the NSC? The National Security Council. It's an advisory group that advises the president on foreign policy or national security. Robert McFarland, Elliot Abrams. Oliver North is the star of the show. He's a National Security Council aide. Poindexter, Casey's the CIA chief at the time. Caspar Weinberger was Secretary of Defense during the era. Oliver North is going to become the star. He's a young man, Hollywood star, good looks. He's brave, he's brash, he's loud, patriotic. He's gonna fight the communists, and so he's definitely going to be the star of this show. Okay. So what is Iran-Contra? It is a scandal. Okay, if it's not your favorite scandal, by the time I'm done with it, I haven't done my job. But what are the administration goals? Why are you doing this thing that becomes the Iran-Contra scandal? Number one, you want to free the hostages in Lebanon. There's about a dozen by this point. Again, journalists. One of them's a minister. Again, one of them's a CIA spy. So goal number one, you want to free the hostages in Lebanon. Okay. You saw what a hostage crisis did to, you saw what a hostage crisis did to Carter. You know what was happening to you. And number two, you want to help the Contras. Okay. So the National Security Council, they hatch a plot to accomplish both those goals. Okay. We're going to set up a set of policies. We're going to help free the hostages in Lebanon, and then we're also going to help the Contras over here. Okay. So you have this plot. Lieutenant Colonel, well, he was a Lieutenant Colonel at one point. Oliver North. He's going to kind of be the star of the show, because the National Security Council that advises the president, they kind of have him do all the dirty work. Oliver North kind of does all the dirty work. So that's why he becomes the star of the show, because he's doing everything. And so, kind of making it happen. Okay. So in a nutshell, what are you going to do? In a nutshell, what is Iran-Contra? In one easy map. So, you're going to sell missiles to Iran. Okay. Iran, at this time in the early 80s, is in the middle of a war with Iraq. Okay. Iran and Iraq are at war with each other right now in the early 80s. So Iran needs weapons. So what you're going to do is, you're going to sell missiles to Iran. Okay. You're going to sell missiles to Iran. With the money you get from the missile sales, you're going to give to the Contras. What is Iran supposed to do? Okay. Iran is supposed to go to their friends in Lebanon, Hezbollah. Iran, even today, Iran funds Hezbollah. If Iran didn't support Hezbollah, they might not exist. Hezbollah is an Iranian, even today, it's an Iranian organization. They do what Iran tells them to do, even today in 2024. And they existed in the 70s and 80s. So, tells you how long they've been around. So what Iran is supposed to do, Iran is supposed to go to their buddies in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and tell them to cough up their hostages. Okay? So that's the Iran-Contra scandal in a nutshell. Okay? You sell missiles to Iran, a country you deemed a terrorist state. With the money, you help the Contras. And what Iran's supposed to do, in order to get those missiles, Iran is supposed to go to Hezbollah and tell their buddies to cut it out. Okay? So that's the Iran-Contra scandal in a nutshell. Like, this could be lecture over, right? There it is. Okay. One of the reasons you like me is the details, right? No. So let's go over the Iran part of the Iran-Contra scandal. You have a guy named Manichar Ghorbanifar. He is a CIA asset. Okay? He claims to have links in the Iranian government. Okay? And so he tells the CIA and the National Security Council, I can help you set up this plan. Okay? What are some problems with Manichar Ghorbanifar? And I said CIA asset. I should have put former because guess what? The CIA doesn't work generally. The CIA stopped working with Ghorbanifar. Why? Because they deemed him a liar. They thought he was a liar. The information he gave in the past, it was not credible. They said he's not a good CIA asset. He lies. He doesn't give us good information. So what's kind of funny is, though, with the Iran-Contra scandal, the National Security Council and the CIA, Ghorbanifar goes back and says, hey, I can help you here. So the CIA, against their better judgment, what do? They start listening to him. Right? What other contacts in Iran do we have? We don't. Right? They were kicked out. When the Islamic Republic took over, they kicked out all the American assets or shot them. So Ghorbanifar is kind of he's like it. And so the CIA, even though the CIA knows that he's a fabricator, they kind of go, well, okay, well, it's like, we want to sell missiles to Iran. We need somebody. So Ghorbanifar claims to be an asset with have links in the Iranian government. Okay. Again, the plan is to sell missiles to Iran. The money is going to be deposited in Saudi Arabian banks and then used to help the Contras. I should have also put Swiss bank accounts too. There's going to be Saudi Arabian banks used, and then Swiss bank accounts are going to be used too. This would technically be called money laundering. Okay, because why? You're taking money from Iran that you got from the missile sales, and you're not going all the way. You're not helping the Contras with that. You're depositing the money in Saudi Arabian banks and Swiss bank accounts, and that's where you're getting money from. So it's kind of laundering the money. So Oliver North, what can Oliver North say when he takes money out? Tell the Contras, what did he say? I'm getting my money from Saudi Arabian banks, the Swiss bank account. It's not coming from missile sales to Iran. So it's a form of what it is a form of money laundering. It's a form of money laundering. So those are one of the bad. What's bad about it is it's technically money laundering what you're doing. So anyway, so Ghorbanifar, in this situation, he does have some links with the Iranian government. So that's how this gets going on. The problem is, Ghorbanifar kind of he exaggerates his influence. And again, the CIA had already cut ties with him before because he didn't give good information in the past, right? So the plan is you sell missiles to Iran, and the money is going to go to Contras, and Iran is supposed to go to Hezbollah to free the hostages. Okay. The Nicaraguan part, Oliver North has control over the Saudi Arabian accounts and Swiss bank accounts. He's supposed to take money from that, buy weapons and supplies for the Contras, and then CIA planes are supposed to fly over Nicaragua and drop the supplies and weapons in. Oliver North also solicited aid from Reagan campaign donors. The most famous story is Oliver North met with this lady in Dallas. She was an heiress. She had inherited millions and millions and millions of dollars, like hundreds of millions of dollars. She had previously given a ton of money to the Reagan campaign. She was a Reagan supporter. Well, Oliver North went and solicited not just this lady but others, but she's kind of a famous story. This heiress, he went and he lobbied her, like, we got to help the Contras. Those evil Democrats in Congress are keeping us from helping the Contras, but you can. And she donated $600,000 to the cause. And so that's one of the more famous stories out of Iron Contras. The North campaign is, North's campaign is getting money from private donors, which according to Boland's amendment is illegal. You can't do that, right? So you're supposed to help get these hostages freed. And you're supposed to help the Contras. How did the story break? In the summer of 1986, I actually kind of remember this. I was a teenager. I was 12, 13. I kind of remember the stories from this. In the summer of 1986, a Lebanese paper breaks a story that Israel, the initial story is Israel is selling weapons to Iran. Okay? The initial story is Israel is selling weapons to Iran. But what comes out later on is it's not Israel. What's happening is the U.S. is giving missiles to Israel, and then Israel is taking from their stock of missiles and giving it to Iran. Okay? So that's kind of how it's done. We're not dealing directly with the Iranian government, because we're enemies officially. And so what we end up doing is we're giving Israel missiles, and then Israel is giving those missiles to Iran. Okay. So that's how the story breaks for the Iran part. The Contra part crashes the same summer. A CIA plane crashed. And it was captured by the Sandinistas. And the story breaks, what's a CIA plane, doing, you're not supposed to be here. So the story breaks in the summer of 86. And so the question is, well, how much is the U.S. government involved, right? It comes out that we're actually selling weapons to Iran. Israel is just the go-between. And then it becomes public that we're helping the Contras. A CIA plane crashes, and it is revealed that the CIA has started helping the Contras in violation of the Boland Amendment. So, November 1986, President Reagan has a famous press conference. It's a massively famous press conference. Very public. President Reagan comes out and announces in a press conference that he admits to the Iran weapons sales. He tells the American public that yes, our State Department was trying to, sell weapons to Iran in order for the Iranians to what? Tell their buddies Hezbollah to let the hostages go. Plausible deniability on the Contra part. The Reagan administration kind of hedges their bets on this. They kind of like, we don't really know what that plane was. Rogue rogue CIA operation, you know. So kind of plausible deniability, you know. We're not exactly sure what the CIA was doing, so you kind of distance yourself from that. So you admit the Iran part, because that's not illegal. That's just a PR disaster. You're negotiating with a terrorist state, and Reagan's already publicly said what? We don't negotiate with terrorists. So the first part is it's just a PR nightmare, right? The second one, you're violating congressional law, the Boland Amendment. You're violating congressional law, and so you have the Reagan administration kind of distancing itself from that part. Like, well, we're not exactly sure what happened. Reagan then fires several NSC officials and Caspar Weinberger, the Secretary of Defense. The CIA Director, William Casey, will actually retire. He'll actually die of a brain tumor in January 1987. So, what's the difference between Reagan and Nixon? Historians talk a lot about this. Historians generally hate both. I'm a little more balanced in my views about Nixon and Reagan, so that's why you like me, is I'm a little more balanced. So historians are kind of like, well, how did Nixon get away? How did Nixon not get away with it? Nixon was he was going to get impeached. Reagan gets away with it, so to speak. And here's one of the reasons. Right? When Nixon found out about the Watergate break-in, what did he do? He helped cover it up. He was like, you know, how can we cover this up? Let's have the CIA investigate rather than the FBI. Let's give them more of a bribe. You know, Nixon, distancing, kind of covered it up. Reagan comes out and at least partially admits things. Reagan and he fires people, right? Nixon doesn't fire the plumbers, the White House aides that are committing these illegal acts. Nixon didn't fire these aides. He helped them, right? What did Reagan do? Reagan very publicly, he's like, oh, this happened. And what do? Oliver North gets fired. Oliver North got fired. You just start firing everyone. No, we, oh my gosh, oh, whoops, The problem is Democrats hate Reagan just as much as they hate Nixon. They don't want Oliver North. They don't want Oliver North fired. They want President Reagan. They want to get rid of President Reagan, well, I was about to share you my... I was about to say something. Anyways, they want to get rid of Reagan, right? They want to get rid of Reagan like this. So they have hearings. What Democrats want to do is impeach Reagan over Iran-Contra. Okay? They want to impeach him like they want to do with Nixon over Watergate. These hearings are in the summer of 1987. Okay? Here's the second reason that Reagan survived and Nixon didn't. Nixon had a John Dean. Nixon went before the panel, the Senate hearings, and said, Nixon did everything, knew everything, Ronald Reagan never had a John Dean. Okay? And that's the other thing that kind of saved Ronald Reagan is even the people he fired, Oliver North, the people he fired, they distanced Ronald Reagan from the policy making. And that's another reason Ronald Reagan survived this scandal and Nixon didn't survive his, is, Reagan didn't have a John Dean. Everyone was loyal. Oliver North, the only thing Oliver North would say was, I followed orders. I did what I was told. But he would never admit Ronald Reagan. No, Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan was always distanced from everything. Even the meetings he was in, they was no, we did it. 14 people will be charged or have jail time for Iran-Contra. Mostly for lying. Mostly for lying and destroying evidence. And so there's that. So what's the full story on Reagan and Iran-Contra? Based on later information, President Reagan had begun suffering symptoms of Alzheimer's in his second term. It becomes public later on. So it becomes apparent later on that President Reagan begins suffering the early symptoms of it. Okay, so when President Reagan a lot of times would say, "I don't remember," it's because he didn't. He was forgetting things. Based on sources, President Reagan had set the administration goals, but the NSC and the CIA largely kept Reagan in dark about specifics. But Reagan probably knew in general what was going on. Okay, unlike Nixon, though, Reagan admitted mistakes and fired key players. He even testified in later court hearings, and that was one of the problems. President Reagan a lot of times would say, "I don't know," and it became public later after he was president. The Reagan family, had a press conference that publicly, President Reagan suffering from Alzheimer's. And there is evidence late in his second term he was experiencing some of the symptoms. And so you have a president, that's getting older, then so it's getting kind of impairing some of his memory. And so the argument for historians is that kind of allows his underlings to, the NSCCI, kind of do whatever they wanted, which is Iran-Contra. Okay. Second term, the space shuttle program begins in the 80s. The Challenger disaster, that blew up. I remember that. We spent, it was in the morning. We spent the rest of the day, just watching the news. I remember that. This is one of the more controversial aspects of President Reagan's policies, amnesty. What I find interesting is, people that are progressive politically tend to hate Ronald Reagan. What's kind of funny is amnesty, it's like you support this. The Reagan administration granted amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants, making them not subjected to deportation. And from one point of view, it has led to the illegal immigrant crisis we have in America today. Is we have open borders today, and one critique of the Reagan administration is, in the 80s, you kind of opened the floodgates, granting amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants. All of a sudden, they're legal now, right? You're not illegal anymore. You're a legal resident, right? And no one knows exactly how many. I've seen numbers ranging from I've seen 20 million. I think 20 million is a little high. I've seen 1, 2, 5. I saw a source that said 20 million. 20 million illegal immigrants, that seems a little high, and that would be a lot. But, I've seen 1 to 5, 10, so there's a range. But anyway, if you look at our open border issues today, where we literally don't have a border anymore, some of our illegal immigrant or undocumented immigrant problems today kind of stem from this Reagan-era policy of amnesty. And so it kind of subverts a lot of our immigration laws. It's one of the reasons why we, cities and states today, don't follow our immigration laws. Kind of because of this. You kind of open the floodgates, kind of a thing. So where now, we for all intents and purposes, we don't have a border anymore in our southern border. It's for all intents and purposes open, which is, to get into current events, it's one reason, it's one of the reasons for President Trump's support is border security, is we need to actually have a border. And so the famous Trump wall kind of a thing. And that's one of the reasons for President Trump's support is, we need to actually have policies, and so we just can't, let everyone in, so to speak. And that's what makes President Trump controversial today, right, it's one of the reasons. The 1986 Tax Reform Act raises Social Security taxes. That's kind of another controversial thing. President Reagan is known as limited government, conservative. He signs the bill raising Social Security taxes. Supporters say he was forced to from the Democrats in Congress. So there's that. Second term Cold War, you have Reagan and Gorbachev, nuclear arms talks, the Berlin Wall speech, the famous Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, Star Wars program. The Reagan administration challenged the Soviet Union. Unlike the Carter administration, the Reagan administration challenged Soviet expansion. Gorbachev comes to power in the Soviet Union as a reformer, and so you kind of have this, like, you have a reformer in office in the Soviet Union. You have Reagan challenging the Soviets. So that's where the famous Star Wars program comes from. What the Star Wars program is going to be is when the Soviets launch their nuclear weapons into space, we'll have satellites. They'll shoot them down with lasers, and that's what's called the Star Wars program, because it envisions Star Wars. Lasers shooting down missiles. Like a science fiction movie. Here's the famous tear down the wall speech. Some famous Reagan quotes. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? One of my favorites, the best welfare program is a job, right? Rather than being dependent on government, you're independent. You have a job. Government isn't the solution to the problem, it is the problem. That's another famous Reagan quote, right? Government's not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem, right? It creates more problems than it solves. Some other trust but verify, some other quotes, right? The election of '88, Republicans nominate George H.W. Bush. Democrats nominate Mike Dukakis. Republicans successfully paint Dukakis as soft on crime, communism, and his policy would ruin the economy like Carter. The Republicans painted Dukakis as a second Jimmy Carter. It'd be Jimmy Carter all over again, right? Here's the election of '88. Bush wins. Some pop culture from the '80s. Video games start. I was a kid in the '80s. I remember the first video games. So Zork, Pong, Pac-Man. This is the Valley Girl look. Ladies, the Valley Girl look. Original Nikes, Chia Pets, Rubik's Cube. Okay. Some famous TV shows. I remember all these as a kid. I loved them. Well, not Dallas. Dallas was an adult show. Right. Some movies from the era: Return of the Jedi, E.T. People, if you don't cry in E.T., you're a robot. Okay. Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones. Some famous musicians: Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's probably the most famous. I mean, jeez. He dominated the 80s. Like, oh my gosh. Anyways. So that is the end of that. Thank you for hanging out with me. Have a great day.